Welcome to your overview video for Chapter 22, Music in the Late 19th Century, Nationalism, Romanticism, and Beyond. Your learning objectives are: number 1, to identify some of the most important composers in Germany and Austria in the late 19th century and briefly describe one or more characteristic works by each. Number 2, to name some of the most prominent classical European composers active outside of Germany and Austria in the late 19th century, describe some of their music, characterize their styles, and explain their relationship to the dichotomy between musical nationalism and internationalism. And number 3, to explain why the United States had such a diverse musical culture in the late 19th century, name some of the most prominent composers active there, and describe their music. Composers outside of Germany and Austria drew both on the German tradition and on the music of their own nations, increasing the diversity of classical music. Other streams in musical life included entertainment music, popular song, folk music, and utilitarian music. In Paris, concerts focused on classical symphonic music and on new French works in the same vein. Concert series, composers, and even musical styles were often associated with political movements. Music schools reflected a diversity of ideologies and educational concerns, from technical training to the study of history. Hugo Wolf, 1860 to 1903, is best known for adapting Wagner's methods to the German Lied. His 250 lieder treat the poem as an equal partner to the music, reflecting Wagner's notion of a collective artwork. The musical continuity is often in the piano, while the voice adapts a speech-like arioso style, as in Wagner's operas. Gustav Mahler, 1860 to 1911, was the leading Austro-German composer of symphonies after Brahms and Bruckner, and one of the great masters of the song for voice and orchestra. He made a living as a conductor, directing the Vienna Opera and New York Philharmonic. Composing mainly in the summers, Mahler completed 9 symphonies and 5 multi-movement works for voice and orchestra. Mahler used voices in 4 of his symphonies, and sometimes incorporated melodies from his own songs. His symphonies often convey a sense of life experience, as if telling a story or depicting a scene through a variety of musical topics. Typically, Mahler's works require an enormous number of performers that he combines in imaginative ways, producing a vast palette of sounds and effects from gigantic to delicate. Mahler's Fourth Symphony features strong contrasts between and within movements. In the first movement, Mahler interweaves classical references, romantic fantasy, and modern style, sometimes ironically, to create a musical metaphor for contradictions of modern life. The irony of Nun will die Sohn, so hell aufgehen from Kindertotenlieder, songs on the death of children from 1901 to 1904, is heightened by an understated restraint and at times by an emotional mismatch between text and music. Das Lied von der Erde, the Song of the Earth, 1908, is a work for soloists with orchestra that alternates between the frenzied activity of life and sad resignation on having to part from it. Richard Strauss, 1864 to 1949, was a dominant figure in German musical life as a composer and conductor, and is remembered for his tone poems, operas, and lieder. Strauss's chief models for program music were Berlioz and Liszt. His tone poems cover a broad spectrum from the representational to the philosophical. Don Juan, from 1888 to 1889, is his first mature work, and most of the piece evokes general moods rather than following a specific plot. Till Eulenspiegel, from 1894 to 1895, a representational tone poem, uses a program to explain novel musical sounds and forms. Yet the music makes sense on its own terms. Although the general course of the program for Also sprach Zarathustra from 1896 is philosophical, moments are directly representational. Strauss used variation form for Don Quixote from 1897, transforming the beginnings of the two main themes into new melodic characters. Strauss turned to opera after his success with symphonic poems. He used leitmotifs and associated certain keys with particular characters. In order to dramatize the strange subject, actions, and emotions in the Salome, Strauss created harmonically complex and dissonant music that inspired later composers. For Elektra, from 1906 to 1908, Strauss again combined intensified chromaticism, dissonance, and tonal instability with diatonic and tonally stable passages. By contrast, in Der Rosenkavalier, The Cavalier of the Rose, from 1909 to 1910, set in the 18th century Vienna, simple diatonic music dominates and chromaticism suggests enchantment. Standing against the professionalism of the conservatories in Moscow and St. Petersburg were five composers dubbed the Mighty Five: Mily Balakirev, 1837 to 1910, Alexander Borodin, 1833 to 1887, Cesar Cui, 1835 to 1918, Modest Mussorgsky, 1839 to 1881, and Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov, 1844 to 1908. Mussorgsky is widely considered the most original of the Mighty Five, and his opera Boris Godunov, 1868 to 1869, later revised from 1871 to 1874, echoes the realism prominent in 19th century Russian literature. Mussorgsky followed the rhythm and pacing of speech and sought a melodic profile similar to Russian folk songs. His harmony is essentially tonal, but he often juxtaposed distantly related or coloristic harmonies, sometimes joined by a common tone. Mussorgsky and many other Russian composers alternated large blocks of material instead of using traditional development. Mussorgsky's principal non-operatic works are the symphonic fantasy Night on Bald Mountain from 1867, Pictures at an Exhibition from 1874, a suite of character pieces for piano, later orchestrated by Ravel, and 3 song cycles. Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov became a professor at the St. Petersburg Conservatory, abandoning the anti-academic stance of the Mighty Five. His professionalism guaranteed the continuation of the distinctively Russian school through his activities as editor, conductor, and teacher. He is best known for his programmatic orchestral works, such as the exotic Scheherazade. For his operas, Rimsky-Korsakov used Russian subjects and in many of them alternated a diatonic style used for the everyday world with a lightly chromatic style used for the fantastic or magical world. He often used the whole tone scale and the octatonic scale, respectively, scales composed of all whole tones or of whole tones and half steps in strict alternation in the fantastic style. Edvard Grieg, 1843 to 1907, from Norway, and Edward Elgar, 1857 to 1934, from England, also contributed to the classical canon. Grieg wrote music that incorporated the modal melodies, harmonies, and dance rhythms of Norway, as well as music that was not nationalist. Elgar, the first English composer in more than 200 years to enjoy international recognition, adopted the universal language of the classical tradition. Before the emergence of Impressionism, there were 2 main strands of composition in Paris: a cosmopolitan tradition and a more specifically French tradition. César Franck, 1822 to 1890, blended traditional counterpoint and classical forms with Liszt's thematic transformation, Wagnerian harmony, and romantic cyclic unification through thematic returns. Franck's keyboard music reflects the thematic and harmonic methods of Liszt and Wagner, and the organ music of Bach and the French Baroque. His chamber and symphonic works are cyclic and employ thematic transformation. The other tendency in French music drew primarily on earlier French composers, from Couperin to Gounod. The refined songs, piano pieces, and chamber works of Gabriel Fauré, 1845 to 1924, embody the qualities of the French tradition. Fauré's works are marked by lyrical melodies, lack of virtuosic display, and harmony that does not drive toward a tonic resolution, but uses chromaticism to create a sense of repose or even stasis. His innovative treatment of harmony and melody is reflected in the song cycle La Bonne Chanson, the Good Song, from 1892 to 1894, based on the symbolist poems of Paul Verlaine, from 1844 to 1896. After Verdi, a number of Italian opera composers achieved prominence. Verissimo, the operatic equivalent to realism in literature, produced two operas that entered the repertoire: Cavalleria Rusticana, Rustic Chivalry, from 1890, by Pietro Mascagni, 1863 to 1945, and I Pagliacci, The Clowns, from 1892, by Ruggero Leoncavallo, 1857 or 58 to 1919. Giacomo Puccini, 1858 to 1924, was the most successful Italian opera composer after Verdi. He blended Verdi's focus on vocal melody with elements from Wagner's approach. Puccini's operas, choruses, and ensembles are usually part of a continuous flow rather than set off as independent numbers. Puccini's melody-centered, colorful, seamlessly continuous, and emotionally direct style is evident in Madama Butterfly, 1904. Musical life in the United States was influenced by its ethnic diversity, as well as by the rapidly emerging distinctions between classical, popular, and folk music. German musicians who immigrated to America played in orchestras and taught music and composition, largely shaped the classical traditions in this country. Native-born composers, many of whom studied in Germany, were able to pursue careers that combined composition with performing and teaching. Among the most prominent were George Whitefield Chadwick, from 1854 to 1931, and Edward MacDowell, from 1860 to 1908, who incorporated American elements in some of their works. Amy Marcy Beach, 1867 to 1944, was internationally recognized as one of America's leading composers. Some of her music had ethnic flavor, but most of it engaged the traditions of the German classics. She wrote large-scale works such as her Mass in E-flat from 1890, Gaelic Symphony from 1894 to 1896, Piano Concerto from 1899, and Piano Quintet from 1907, all of them well received. For your 25-question quiz, I would know about Hugo Wolf. I would know about Mahler and Strauss. I would know about Mahler's symphonies and his Lied. I would know about Mahler's Lied von der Erde. I would know about Till Eulenspiegel. Know about Strauss's Don Quixote. Know about Strauss's operas. Know who the Mighty Handful are. Know about the work of Mussorgsky Boris Godunov. Know about Russian music and its blocks. Know about Rimsky-Korsakov and his Scheherazade. Know about Grieg. Know about Elgar. Know who the Société Nationale de Musique was? Know about César Franck, Gabriel Fauré? Know what Verissimo was? Know about Puccini and Verdi? Know about the style of Puccini and his influences? Know about Germany's influence on the United States? And know about Amy Beach? Good luck.